Welcome to the second episode of the Holy Isle podcast. We're so glad that you joined us today on Facebook Live. We're using Facebook Live because it's just easy, and so here we are, and it's a beautiful day as it turned out. I wasn't sure that the rain would cease, and yet here we are. So what a great day it is. Glad you tuned in. This is called the Holy Isle podcast because we are on a sort of holy isle. Our patron Saint Aidan set up his missionary monastery on Lindisfarne, also nicknamed Holy Isle, in Northumbria, England. And from there he evangelized the whole region. And we're kind of on an island too, sort of connected to land in the same way Lindisfarne is sort of connected to land, and so this is just named Holy Isle because it just makes sense. Our podcast is sort of in three parts. The first part is getting to know our guests, and the second part is highlighting a ministry, and the third part is just having a little bit of fun with a lightning round question. So it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome to the Holy Isle podcast a dear friend of mine, a colleague, someone I respect and admire very much, and who I'm always learning new things about. It is my honor to welcome to the Holy Isle podcast Mr. Steve Jensen, Director of Music at St. Aidan's Episcopal Church. Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
It's so good that you're here. Thanks for coming on.
Sure.
This is a different kind of thing we're doing. It's new for me, it's new for you, and here we are.
All right.
So part one is sort of getting to know you, and I think what's interesting about you and what people may or may not know is you've lived in a few different places.
I have.
And in fact, people may not know this, but by birth, you are a Southerner. Is that true?
That's true, yeah.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi, and I've had to relearn some of the accent. But my dad was in the Air Force, so I was only there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to California and went to Hawaii from there. It was all over.
Do you have any memory of Mississippi? You were so young at the time.
I do. I have one memory, and it's just this visual of standing on the beach with a picnic table over here, and I'm looking out over the mud flats, and the water is about 2 miles away, it seems. That's it.
That's a good image. That's a good image. It reminds me of Holy Isle when we were on pilgrimage there in 2016 with Jeff Johnson. We were standing on one side looking across the mud flat as the tide had receded out to Holy Isle, and I had the distinct privilege of walking across that pilgrim's way, across that mud in my bare feet. And so this memory of yours just triggered that for me. So
That's fun.
That's cool. Your dad was Herman Jensen, is that right?
Correct.
And he was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And what was that like for you as a Air Force military brat?
Well, at the time, it seemed perfectly normal.
What else is there?
That's right. And it was only until later in life that I realized that many other people had different experiences growing up.
Very different.
But I would move every 3 or 4 years, and so with one notable exception, I knew no one my age for longer than 4 years at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant my long-term relationships were with my family, and often with older people. So it was interesting growing up without having long-term, best friends.
And your mom was Donna Jensen.
Yes.
Middle name Charmaine.
Yes.
Beautiful name.
Well, you didn't ask about my dad's middle name.
I just assumed you didn't have one because it wasn't in my notes.
Oh, it's much more interesting. His middle name is Wilfred.
That's a good name. Wilfred. If only we could all have a middle name.
Yeah, right. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no. And so your dad was in the Air Force. Your mom was a master seamstress. Is that right?
Well, she was many things. She grew up on a farm in Auburn, and she was a professional seamstress. She had her own shop for a while, but she also was an amazing cook. She could pick a good laying hen. She was a pretty good carpenter. Her dad worked remodeling houses in West Seattle, and she helped him a lot. So she knew how to do things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she was pretty amazing.
Now, I wasn't here at St. Aidan's in 2006, but I heard that Billy's wedding dress was beautiful. Who made that?
My mom made it.
She did.
Yeah.
Just whipped it out.
Well, not exactly. It was a little more involved, but just to give you a sense of my mom's sewing, she made shirts for my brother and I when we were in high school, and I would pick out some material, and she would go away for an hour and a half, make a shirt, and bring it back and give it to me. She was really good.
In many ways, you're not. I don't know, but it seems you may take after your mother.
Well, she taught me a lot. Yeah.
Because you're very much a jack of all trades, like your mom was.
Well, one of the main things that she taught me, along with other good teachers, was how to learn things, and how to find interest in everything. So, there's a similarity.
And there's a story, I think, about your mom, something about baking cookies and the whole town kind of coming around, or...
Well, she would do that every fall. She would start baking cookies, mostly traditional Scandinavian cookies at first, but she branched out a lot. And then she would put the cookie dough in the freezer for the most part and bake up some, but she was baking and mixing cookies all through the fall. And on the weekend between Christmas and New Year, she'd have an open house. And she would invite all the neighbors over and see if they would eat all the cookies that we kids haven't already finished off. So I learned to eat cookies really well. We had a couple dozen varieties and many, many, many dozens of each from which to choose.
Your mom sounds like a really interesting lady.
Yes.
Oh, did she have a musical bent to her?
Well, no, not particularly. And my dad, I found out later, actually is a pretty good singer. But I never heard him singing when I was growing up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So their musical interest was mostly a little bit of radio and a small stack of records.
So in the third grade, you moved to Hawaii.
Actually, no, that's only half correct. I moved to Hawaii after kindergarten.
Okay.
I started first grade in Hawaii.
I mean, that sounds like a dream.
Well,
it's tropical paradise.
Okay, so picture this. I'm 6 years old. I'm living on a military base, not close to the beach because my dad's not an officer. And I can't go anywhere by myself.
Oh.
So it was great.
Or prison.
That's right. No, I was able to play in the warm rain in the courtyard in front of the house every day. It would rain most every afternoon in the rainy season, and that was pretty fun. And I went to the beach when they took me. But yeah, it was pretty interesting, but it wasn't a paradise.
Your dad then moved to Arlington, Virginia, and retired from the Air Force.
Right.
And he became a bookkeeper at the Library of Congress.
Yeah, there was a little stint in between where he worked at a seafood restaurant as a bookkeeper for a couple of years before that. But yeah.
That's kind of a neat job. There's a lot of mystique around the Library of Congress.
Yeah, it's an interesting place, and he was in the photo duplication department, so he wasn't really involved with working in the stacks and seeing all the material they had there, but it was there and available. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Now there's this famous story about you and your brother. your brother was a mechanic, right?
Yes,
And for Christmas, one time I think he gave you some lead weights.
he did.
And then here's the interesting part, though. That would be a gag gift for most of us. But you did something interesting with it. What happened?
Well, actually, he gave me the lead because he knew I wanted it. So it wasn't a joke. It was I was experimenting with things, and I discovered that if I left it on long enough, my mom's gas stove would melt lead in my aluminum cast aluminum pan. So I started making art with molten lead by doing things like pouring it on ice, and it would solidify in really interesting shapes, and other things like that. And so he knew I needed some lead, and he was a car mechanic, and he had an endless supply of old wheel weights. So I got a gallon jar of wheel weights for Christmas.
And that was perfect.
That was absolutely perfect. Yeah, he was very thoughtful.
That's great. I also understand it. As a kid, you did a bit of fishing. You would catch prey fish. What was that about?
Well, there's a stream that ran through the neighborhood, and it ran into a larger stream that emptied into the Potomac nearby. And there wasn't a whole lot of life in the stream, but there were two creatures that lived there. There were salamanders and there were crayfish. And so, for entertainment, as you know, a 9-10-year-old kid, I'd go off with my friends and we'd catch crayfish. And you pick up the rock and make sure you have your hand in the right place, and they scoot right back into your hand.
Crayfish, yeah. And then
Too small to eat them.
That's a very southern thing to have, like a crawdad feast, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but these were way too small.
Oh, okay.
They were only a couple inches long. So I never considered eating one.
What I love about you, Steve, is that your interests are far and wide, and there's no field of knowledge or experience that in some sense you're not open to or haven't tried. You have an adventurer's spirit, and you have an intellectual mind, and it's such great fun to speak with you, especially as I walk through your story, and I stumble upon things like the fact that I think you might have hitchhiked to Woodstock. Is that correct?
I almost did. I was not quite old enough to hitchhike to Woodstock, but I did hitchhike to visit a friend at Bates College in Maine. I think it was the year or two after that. I strongly considered going to Woodstock.
I mean, it would have made perfect sense. It would have made perfect sense. But that's how people can,
Yeah.
come to bad ends.
Well, it's true.
But somebody's...
Hitchhiking, in those days, it was much more common and presumably less dangerous. I don't know that for a fact.
You worked at a bike shop for 6 years in Virginia. Were you a big cyclist?
Yeah, I would. Well, I lived out in the county, about 20 miles from work, and I rode to work every day. And
20? How many miles?
20.
You rode 20 miles every day.
Every day, yeah.
One way?
Yeah.
20 miles one way.
Right. Yeah. So 40-mile round trip. And for recreation, I would go off with a friend and ride the Appalachian Trail, the highway along the Appalachian Trail, and we'd go out for an 80-90 mile ride just to, go out for a day. And that's pretty much what I did in those days. I had a garden, not a very big one, but had a garden, and I rode my bike, and I worked at the bike shop.
I mean, that's a pretty kind of idyllic existence in some ways.
In some ways it was, yeah.
After those 6 years at the bike shop, you moved to Bellingham. What inspired you to come from east to west? For me, I was coming home, but for you, it was part of the adventure. What?
Well, there's some of that. There's a little bit of the coming home because my family came from out here.
That's right.
At that point, all my relatives that were still alive, mostly were in the Seattle area. But really, the thing I remember about the choice was I was riding home one day on my bike and noticing the orange glow around the city. And the color of the mercury vapor lamps,
Mm-hmm.
the orange haze that was smog and the light from the lamps, and I thought, well, there might be a nicer place to live, and then the whole scene of living in a crazy, highly political area. I just thought, it might be interesting to try somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, this was one of my first choices to check out. And then I did. I took a trip first with a friend. We went to San Diego and then up the coast and then back. And then that was 6 months before I moved out here. So I just kind of checked out all the possibilities, and Bellingham won out.
When you moved to Bellingham finally, you ended up living in a yurt. And most people probably know what a yurt is, but maybe some people don't. I think that's a pretty sort of amazing and romantic thing to do. What is a yurt?
Well, the traditional yurt is a structure made out of yak felt and lattice work, and it's circular in shape with a conical roof.
Uh-huh.
My yurt was made out of plywood, and there are just many advantages. A yurt is round,
Mm-hmm.
and the walls slope out,
Mhm.
so you've got the maximum space right about shoulder height. So it's a really efficient use of space. It's easy to heat. They're portable if you want to make them that way.
Mhm.
Just take the bolts out and haul it off somewhere else. But mostly, I had the opportunity of living out in the woods south of Bellingham, and I had a friend that had the yurt, and he said, "Well, you could borrow this for a while." So I did.
That's crazy. And from the yurt, were you still bicycling as your main mode of transportation?
Well, yeah, but I was working at the food co-op in Bellingham at the time, and it was just south of Lake Samish, so I don't know, that's probably 3-4 miles into town. So it's a pretty easy ride.
And on that ride, did you have an incident?
Well, actually, it wasn't on that. Well, yeah, it was on that ride. It was going home.
Yeah.
When I was at a meeting, a food co-op meeting at the park there at Lake Samish, and I was heading south to the yurt, and this kid that had been partying was coming the other way in his Jeep, and we kind of ended up in the same spot at the same time.
How fast was he coming, you think?
Well, I really don't have any way of knowing what his speed was, but he was coming around at that part of the road on the lake. It curves. It's really serpentine at that moment. He was cutting corners, so he might have been going 30 or 40 miles an hour.
30 or 40. That really put you in the hospital.
Yep. Yeah, I was surprised actually. They put me back together enough, and
That's amazing.
it amazed me.
And how long was the recovery? I know you busted I think you broke your leg and...
Every bone on my leg except one.
Wow.
And one of them was broken twice, and one of the kneecaps. It was pretty extensive, and the elbow.
And as I understand, the kid in the Jeep drove off.
Well, yeah.
But incidentally, they actually found this kid
Yeah.
that had done this, which we was completely at fault. But the story about how they found him was sort of interesting. How'd that happen?
Well, it almost sounds like a TV show to me. For the state trooper that did the investigation, first of all, his name Rocky Champagne.
Rocky Champagne.
Wonderful name for a state trooper, and he's a great singer too, by the way. I've sung with him since. And Rocky went and investigated the site and picked up easily 3 dozen little things from the road and put them in his little baggies. And one of those things was a paint chip about the size of a quarter. And the next day, he was stopping speeders up on the freeway. And in his investigation, he had taken some names of some kids that were driving around south end of the lake and making noise and stuff. So he had this name, and he recognized the name of this guy when he pulled him over speeding, and started talking to him. And the guy says, "Well, I really don't know anything about that, but the guy I was with, he works right down there at Albertsons, and his Jeep's parked right there." So they were looking down at the South End Mall in Bellingham, and so Rocky went and matched the paint chip to the hood of the Jeep, and that's how they found it.
That is like a TV show.
Yeah, yeah.
You almost can't make that stuff up.
Right.
Now, you did some time at Western Washington University. What did you study there?
Well, I started out studying the sciences. My first year was all biology, chemistry, physics, calculus, normal sort of science track. And then I realized that since I had the opportunity to be there, I wanted the training in music, because I didn't vision being a scientist working, in research or anything. And so I thought, well, I need the training in music, because I like doing music, but I don't know enough about it.
No.
So I went in the music department and graduated with a music degree.
But you had some experience in music, because you were playing in a 50s cover band in your 20s, and you were playing bass, I think, so you had that whole foundation, but now you're known for voice.
Right. Well, there are two parts to that. First of all, I started out playing keyboard in a garage band in high school.
Like you do.
Yeah, of course. And later on, I played bass because someone needed a bass player. But mostly, I was just kind of making it up.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to get in the music department at Western, I had to choose an instrument. And as it turns out, I wasn't good enough on any instrument to get into the department, because they had standards.
Imagine that.
So yeah, so a friend of mine, a voice teacher actually, said, well, all you need to do if you declare voice as your instrument is show potential. So she had me learn a couple of songs and help me out a little bit that way, and I showed some potential, and they let me in.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right about this time, I think, while you were at Western, you started directing the Norwegian choir.
Yep.
And was that to grow your potential, or they just happened to need someone? Were you winging it? Like, how did that come to be?
I was starting out my business in landscaping at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working in the garden of the neighbor of the cousin of a Norwegian singer,
Okay.
Carl Dahl, and he at present was the director because no one else would do it, and he knew how to wave his hand anyway. And so he just came over and started talking to me and said, I heard you know something about music. I said, well, yeah, a little bit. I'm just about to graduate from Western. So, well, why don't you come and sing with us? What do you sing? Well, we sing Norwegian. And I said, in my naivete, wow, I didn't think people even spoke Norwegian anymore. He liked that. So that's how they got me in, and I went down there and was amazed at what they were doing and said, whoa, I got to join this. This is amazing.
And you've been directing Norwegian choirs ever since in some capacity.
Yep.
And sometimes a couple, I think.
Well, I started directing the Bellingham Choir back in '86, and then I took on the Everett Choir some years after that, and then we started up the Skagit Valley Manskor around 2000, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And the Women's Choir, the Bellingham Norwegian Women's Choir, a couple of years before that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and those have all been, once we started, I've been doing it ever since. So until recently, I've been directing 4 Norwegian choirs.
And Steve, you're an interesting guy. I mean, there's so many more things we could cover. That you designed and built your house in Bellingham.
Mm-hmm.
You designed it yourself. You built it yourself. You own your own business. You have done so many things. but for us at St. Aidan's, obviously, we know you as the guy for music.
Yeah.
And you do such a beautiful job with our choir. And it seems no matter how many we have, you're able to bring out of people the best in their voice. That's a real gift. And so I'm just sort of curious, how did you find your way to St. Aidan's, or how did St. Aidan's find you, and how did you become our director of music?
Well, that's all Billy's fault. Sometime after I started directing the Norwegians in Everett, one of them who lived on Camano Island recruited Billy to be the accompanist. And so she started playing, and it was a wonderful moment. She was the first real accompanist we had ever had in that group.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she wasn't just a piano player. She knew what to do and when to do it, and she could follow where I was going before I got there, and sometimes before I knew. But she's just an excellent accompanist, and so we grew to be friends, and later were married here. She was the organist here, and so I started singing in the choir.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we were in the old building, and mostly Billy was doing everything. She was leading the choir from the piano, and when she needed a little help with directing entrances, Nancy Merklinghouse would help out.
Uh-huh.
And so then I started helping out little bits here and there, and kind of started being the director pretty much every week, and then I got hired.
Yeah, what a great gift for us, and I think you also found a good spiritual community as well.
Yes, and it's certainly, well, it's really important to me. Musicians in the church have a bit of a quandary, and in many churches, the choir director and the organist aren't allowed to be members even.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strange situation in some ways, and I don't particularly want to be a part of a church that wants me as an employee but not as a member.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, what am I going to do? So anyway, so I was welcomed well here, and I saw a vibrant community that was really interested in learning and growing, and so that's certainly a part of what kept me here.
Yeah. There was for me coming to St. Aidan's, there was just a sense that there was a lot of love in this place, and you probably experienced that too.
Yes.
Your daughter, Erin, was a delight to talk to prior to this podcast, me doing this podcast with you. One thing she said to me, she said, my dad knows how to do literally everything. He's so knowledgeable. Quote, like a human encyclopedia. And I know what she means by that, and to our great benefit, you are like that with music. If anyone's been in the music room, you have 4 file cabinets completely full of categorized music. You're able to speak fluently the language of music. You're able to speak to hymns across traditions. You have multiple hymnals, and you know what's in all of them. And so it's really fun to learn from you. I asked you to give me 11 of your favorite hymns or 10 of your favorite hymns, which you found absolutely impossible to do, which I totally get. Like, that would be difficult for anyone with so much exposure. But you did it, and there were some really good ones in there, and some that I had forgot about. There's a little known Welsh hymn called Callan Lan. Am I pronouncing that right?
As far as I know, my Welsh is a little deficient, but I think that's pretty close.
It's translated as pure heart, I believe.
Yes.
And that is a sort of like a Welsh national anthem almost. It's sung at rugby games.
Yes. Yes, it is one of them that's very popular over there.
Uh-huh.
And we've used it a couple of times here.
And incidentally, and unfortunately, I couldn't find it in our hymnal.
Am I surprised?
But you know, we stem from the Church of England, perhaps maybe not the Church of Wales. I think.
We have many. We have at least half a dozen, probably 10 Welsh hymns in our hymnal.
Oh yeah, sure, no doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt. So that was a good one. I looked it up on YouTube, and immediately I knew what it
Yes.
was and why you chose it. Excellent. Did you know that in our hymnal, and I didn't know this, but did you know that there is a hymn tune called Camena?
Yes, I know. It unfortunately isn't the best hymn tune.
Yeah. What can you do?
But it's there.
Say. Do you know anything about it?
I don't know the source of the name. That would be my biggest curiosity. I don't know. All I know is from my experience with it and people's reaction to it. It's there.
It's
but,
there.
Yeah.
We've often talked in other venues about German chorales. Now, isn't German chorale kind of a redundant? Didn't Luther, come up with the form almost?
Well, it means slightly different things to different people.
Okay.
But as I use the term German chorale, I'm talking about a particular style of hymn that's generally 4 parts and sung a cappella, and as opposed to lieder or art songs of any sort, or other types of concert pieces. This is a particular shape.
Okay. And we have a fair number of German chorale hymns in our.
We do. Yes.
Can you name one that we know and love here at St. Aidan's?
Well, the Passion Chorale is by far the finest hymn written, and a wonderful example of the German chorale style. Oh, Sacred Head.
Oh, Sacred Head.
Yes.
Oh, indeed. And we sing that most Monday, Thursday evenings, or Good Fridays sometimes.
Yes.
The other 8 or 9 hymns that you listed, Where I Am the Bread of Life, which we absolutely love here.
Well, but the one I listed was the one by John Michael Talbot.
Talbot, yeah.
Which is a different tune. I love the one in our hymnal as well, as do we all, of course.
Uh-huh.
But this one by John Michael Talbot lends itself wonderfully to small group rendition. Great harmonies in the refrain, and it's another wonderful setting.
Uh-huh. That's cool. In a similar spirit, you listed out of Wonder, Love, and Praise, People Look East, which is a personal favorite of mine as well. But our version, you say, is slightly shortened, and he says, I like the original.
Of course.
Which, of course. And we love that you do. Tell us a little bit about the differences.
Well, it's been shortened slightly to make it, I think, more accessible to the general congregation, because the difference is in the ending. in our hymnal, the final phrase is a simple one statement, but in the original, it's the melody line in the sopranos holds the note at the beginning of the phrase, and the other parts come in consecutively, and so it has a really fun and interesting stacked entry of the voices that builds the harmony at the end and kind of adds an extra sparkle at the end of the piece.
And we like sparkle.
Yes, absolutely.
We do like sparkle. You listed out of our hymnal, 328, draw nigh and take the body of the Lord, which shocked me because it's not one that I would go to immediately. Say why you picked that.
Well, just first, that's my absolutely favorite communion hymn. It's a beautiful tune, nicely harmonized by Orlando Gibbons, I believe. It's representative of a style of the earlier periods, Renaissance style of writing. That it was written in the early part of the period where we started having real recognizable harmonies, where people were thinking horizontally in the writing, and it shows. And he did a wonderful job of it.
That's cool. You also listed one of my favorites, "Hail Thee Festival Day."
Yes,
Hail Thee Festival
such
Day.
an exciting one to sing, especially if you have a big crashing organ behind you.
Oh yeah. Wonderful. And then you listed again from Wonder, Love, and Praise, Cuando el Pope. Say a little bit about that one.
Well, there are several tunes from the Hispanic community that we know and love. The Lakeshore is one of the more popular ones that
Yes.
are more well known. This is similar. I like the tune, and the text speaks of when those that have nothing give to others. Well, then we know that God is with us, and that's it's a wonderful and moving thought for me. I mean, that's certainly something that I aspire to give where I don't think I have anything to give.
We all have a gift, right? Somehow.
Yeah.
And it's in learning to give that is a lifelong process, and especially it's God is there when that gift is given and it fits right with someone's need. Only God can sort of bring that about. You list hymn 635, "If Thou But Trust," which is one that I like as well. Tell me about why you like it.
Well, it's another good example of a German chorale style, and it's been a favorite forever. I don't remember when I was first exposed to that, but it has such a wonderful way of stating.
I found your wife out there.
Such a wonderful way of calmly presenting a recommendation that I think is really useful. Remember, if you just trust, but it's set musically in a way that really communicates well for me.
And then this is no surprise to me. You have a streak in you that likes the odd sort of Baptist-y type hymn. And so Blessed Assurance to me is sort of one of those pieces. Tell me about why you chose that.
Well, Blessed Assurance I chose more as an example, a sampling, a representative, if you will. It's a good piece. There's several others that I could have chosen equally well. Fanny Crosby wrote some 30,000 hymns.
Yeah.
And that was one of them. And there was a period in my life when some of the people I knew liked to get together and sing stuff like that. And it's just physically so enjoyable to sing those songs together, especially for me in 4-part harmony with no instruments.
Yeah.
It's just exquisitely fun.
Uh-huh.
And so, it's that whole fun aspect of singing that that represents.
Yeah, music is interesting how you it can reach you on so many levels. I think of beauty, majesty. Some of these hymns done well can lift you up to heaven, but some hymns should just be fun.
Yes.
Fun to sing. It should be deeply relational in terms of what you're sharing, and that's what I'm hearing. That you're getting.
Yep.
From Wonder, Love, and Praise, you chose also 812, which I think is great. I, the Lord of Sea and Sky.
Yeah, it's pretty much everyone's favorite, I think.
Right. Can you go wrong with that?
Right. Well, it's fun to sing. It communicates a wonderful message. It's good music.
And also, in the vein of fun, I think you mentioned fun. The last hymn you have on your list is Wonder, Love, and Praise 787, Sia Humba.
Yeah.
And I think fun just sort of describes that hymn.
And for me, especially the rhythms in there, if you sing it the way it's written, it's even more fun.
Yeah. Right. That's so great. And especially with bongos, or it's with Sia Humba, right?
Well, yeah, if you have a good percussionist, you need someone that can really play the rhythms right, though.
Yeah.
And that's pretty hard.
Right.
So you need a good percussionist to do that.
But if you have it, it's pretty
really
spectacular.
Adds, yes.
Yes. Steve, this has been absolutely fun for me, and I'm so glad you came on the podcast. We like to close the podcast with a lightning round. This lightning round is 10 questions. Comes from James Lipton's Inside the Actor Studio, 10 final questions, which I think he stole from somebody else, I'm not sure. And this is sort of the church edition. So, lightning round. Steve, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. Here we go. Steve, what is your favorite word?
Favorite word? Word. I hate these favorite questions.
First thing.
I have no favorite word. They're all favorites.
They're all favorites.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's your answer.
I'm not stable.
Steve,
yet.
what is your least favorite word?
Well, there we have it again. I'm at a loss to answer such a question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Steve, what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Learning something new. I think that covers all of them, really.
What turns you off?
Closed-mindedness.
What is your favorite churchy, ecclesiastical word? like sacristy or
I use all sorts of words, but to call one a favorite, I don't know. I really can't identify such a thing.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love?
Sound or noise? I mean, lots of sounds are nice sounds. I suppose the first one that comes to mind is sitting in the morning listening to the birds.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Harsh, loud things, I guess, for the most part.
What profession other than the many you've already done would you like to attempt?
Would I, if it was such that I could pick anything I want and oh man, well, pretty much everything I haven't done.
Name one.
Name one. Well, I'd like to be a welder.
That'd be cool. What profession would you never like to do?
I don't think there's anything I would never like to do.
underwear model. That one sounds good.
Well, it seems pretty unlikely. But to say that I would never want to do it, there might be some good reason to do such a thing. I don't know.
Okay. What would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
Steve Jensen, thank you for being on the Holy Isle podcast. This was a gift and a pleasure.
Thank you.